this video, we will go through my new book, Secrets, an anthology comprised of 8 stories by 8 different authors. I'm sure you noticed in my last video, the new editions. Merry Christmas everyone, I'm Jess Bagnall, one of the authors to Secrets. So the theme to this anthology was obviously a secret, any kind, as long as it would hurt or potentially get the main character kicked out of that particular place. And of course, it was an all-female anthology, which means all the authors were female. Each story has a unique name. Roxanne Rose's A Whisper in the Forest, Tony Keefe's Another Choice, C.C. Elaine's The Art of an Abstract, Erin Osborne Gabriella's Clandestine Life, Rona Russell's Revelation, and Marie Gardner's Secret Ties That Bind, Christina McCord's The Prodigy of Werejags, and mine, Pearls. So I thought I would read an excerpt for you today. These only arrived, I'd say last week, so this is the first time I'm seeing them, so I thought we could go through these together. Now the cover, as you'll notice to my other one, this one is shiny and that one is matte, so we've got differences there. Chapter 1. Get the best deal here for quality handcrafted jewellery, I shouted to the passerby. I love the markets, but I particularly love the sound of children pulling away from their mothers to come and see the shiny new things I'd created this week. All the parents loved my whimsical designs. I made sure to make special ones for my returning customers, even giving the children a free bracelet to keep their parents sweet. I breathed in the aroma of freshly baked bread drifting over from across the way. Mr. Jenkins, an adorable man in his late 50s, always made some on the spot with his portable oven. And he would always bring me a loaf, if he had one to spare that is, at the end of the day. Poor guy had lost his wife a few years back, a lovely old crone who'd kept him on a tight leash. He didn't seem too lonely now though. A few months back I spied him with Mrs. Jones flirting. How is Mrs. Jones today, Mr. Jenkins? I asked him that morning. His face turned red, but he smiled and replied with his usual chirp. I haven't seen her today, dear. I'll ask her this afternoon. Oh, anything nice planned? I teased. For a moment he pretended not to understand, but when he had his back to me, he replied, No, dear, she always buys a loaf from me on Sunday. Dirty old man. Should the town ever find out about their affair, well, I'd make sure I had front row seats to watch the whole thing blow up in their faces. There always seemed to be someone new visiting our small town, and the fresh faces I saw every weekend seemed to buzz with energy. Our town is a pass-through point. We're surrounded on all sides by cities, so if someone needs to visit the other, they had to pass through us. Our small town is also enveloped by thick trees on all sides, acting like a kind of moat between the cities. So until they tore the rest of it down to make a bypass, people had no choice but to pass through our small town on their way through somewhere bigger and brighter. Ahem. Shall I leave you to your dreams and come back later? Came a shrill sound to my left. Maggie liked to sneak up on people when they were at their weakest. My ears perked up, and although I considered ignoring her, instead I beamed my brightest, fakest smile, complete with teeth, and replied to her twattish remark. My table meets all your outlandish regulations, ma'am. I became giddy with delight when I caught her grimace at my ma'am. I knew she hated that. It made her feel awed. Not that she needed any help in that department. She dressed like my 80-year-old grandmother, at least how I imagined my 80-year-old grandmother would dress if I had one. She had lipstick-stained teeth and wore long pleated skirts with flowy shirts tucked sloppily into them. The socks, though, were the things that really got me. Who wore white socks with sandals? She performed her usual ritual, walking the length of my stall. She inspected each item on the table, and the table itself, while grumbling the whole time. Then, after writing something in her clipboard, she bent to inspect the table legs. Delia Call. I'm fining you for the condition of your table. You have 1 week to pay this fine, and failure to do so will result in a bigger fine and your license to sell goods in this town being revoked, she stated loud enough for the patrons to hear. What on earth are you talking about, Maggie? Asked Mr. Jenkins. She rents the table from you. You can't fine her for a table you provide. If that was the case, you would have fined me too. He stepped aside to show her one side of his table, which looked like someone had tried to take a bite out of it, or like someone had taken a hammer to it. It looked dangerous. If a child knocked into it, they could get impaled on a large splinter protruding from the corner. That was probably why it was on the side he sat on. Also, he'd put a glove over it. If you sanction her for what, a wobbly leg, I will take the matter up with the mayor myself. Stop picking on the poor girl. By now, the commotion had gathered a crowd, and Maggie had started to look a little grey. Had she planted the table with the massive splinter? Had that table been meant for me? Son of a bitch! Had Mr. Jenkins just saved my ass? I was mildly annoyed by the thought, but I quickly got past it when I saw Maggie's face. She looked like she'd just eaten shit and wanted to spit it out. But she couldn't lose face in front of all these people. I'm giving you a warning, she told me. Should this happen again, I will revoke your license. She threw the paper at me and stalked off growling, I will have your license, freak, before she disappeared. The crowd booed her away, then clapped Mr. Jenkins. Looks like I owe you one, I said, walking around the tables to give him a hug. I'm not a hugger. In fact, I usually steer clear from any physical contact. But this was my give back to Mr. Jenkins. Now I didn't owe him anything. Not at all, dear. Your face brightens a lot of these people's days. We need your young talent. I thanked him again, and as I walked back to my table, he whispered, plus, I love to wind up the old coot. She has such a stick up her ass. I couldn't help but laugh at his cussing. It turned out Mr. Jenkins did have a sense of humour. I just got back to my table when I spotted a teenage boy making a quick swipe. His face barely registered the shock when I grabbed his arm and ripped the ring from his grasp. And shit was his only response as his ass hit the grass. Something in my face must have scared him because he quickly scrambled to his feet and ran away. What was that? I turned to see someone who had recently taken a liking to me. Some kid tried to steal from me, I said, with a shrug. Nora, you know I don't like it when you just pop up like that. Sorry, she had the audacity to look sheepish. I thought you could use a hand. With what? Well, I can be your marketer, I guess. I took pity on the girl and decided she was pretty enough to bring the patrons. She could walk the grounds, mentioning my jewellery to the people and bring them over. She had that alternative girl next door look. Knock off, but not plain Jane either. She reminded me of that Canadian singer, Avril something. Sure, Nora, you can walk around the grounds for me and bring them in. I grinned. You know, go fishing. I chuckled at my own dad joke as she smiled, jumping up and down like an excited puppy. When she finished, I raised my eyebrows at her and shooed her away. I caught Mr. Jenkins smiling at me through the already busy streets, but I ignored him. He probably thought I was doing a good deed. Well, you could think what he liked. The rest of the day was relatively uneventful. Maggie stayed away, though she continued to give me the stink eye from a safe distance. I waved at her every time I caught her looking, giving her my friendliest smile. She was determined to chase me out of her town, though I didn't know what I'd done to upset her. It seemed I just rubbed her the wrong way. Go figure. The idea of winding her up so tight she might burst gave me a warm feeling low in my belly. Mr. Jenkins turned to me with his knowing smile and asked me once again why I wouldn't give Nora a job. As I've said before, Mr. Jenkins, it's not that I don't appreciate the help. I do. I didn't really care for his help, but it seemed to please him to hear it. Sort of like he expected it to be said. If I wanted to stay here, even for a little while, pleasing the old man simply had to be done. But you can't afford to pay her the way that you would expect to be paid, he said, putting his hand up to stop me mid-sentence. I tried not to let the frustration show. You're too honest. Just pay her the apprenticeship rate. Going through the registry again just to give her pocket money? Do you honestly think Maggie will approve the license to have her on my store? I asked him. You're right, she wouldn't. Well, you don't have to go through her. He looked at me, as if I should know the answer already. I did, but I didn't want to abuse the friendships I'd made in this town. Not unnecessarily, anyway. I will not go over Maggie's head just to see her face when I tell her the mayor himself helped me. I know, replied Mr. Jenkins. We had this conversation every Sunday, ever since Nora had decided she liked me. It would be funny to see her face sour, though, he added, chuckling as if he could already see it. I gave him my own version of a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes, and I could feel the revulsion in my belly. I wasn't that proud. I could certainly do with a hand when the market was busy, but I knew that once I let someone in, they'd want to be part of the other side, and I was so not down for spending what little free time I had teaching some over-eager kid how to make jewellery. Besides, the whole process would break her poor little mind. The moment I thought about it, I smiled. If I broke her spirit, she'd leave me alone. But my secret would be out. It wouldn't do to have townspeople find out how I made my jewellery. After all, every tradesman has their own secret, their own skeleton in the cupboard. I sighed and continued packing the jewellery into boxes for next weekend. The beautiful pieces were handcrafted with hours of delicate work going into each unique item. Originally, I had every intention of imitating pearls, and while some still mostly resembled them, they tended to vary in colour. It was hard to make perfect circles out of bone. It could be done, but sometimes my customers like the oddity. They like the flaws. So I made both perfect and imperfect. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about secrets and, well, pearls, and how it came to be. So, I actually struggled for a while with this one because it's my first story where I don't have a basis. All the other stories I've done have been based off something like a fairy tale or my own life, and this one I had to be completely imaginative. And I don't know, it took a little longer than I thought, but once I got my spider diagrams out and I did all of my prep work, it was a case of having to plot out each subplot and working from there. I actually did a small TikTok video on how I planned this one out, and I got about 8 pieces of paper with the title in the middle, big letters, pearls, and I picked each day of the week, and on the back of that day I wrote out bullet points on what I wanted this day to look like, and then I just sort of decided where I wanted my plots and subplots to be and added characters, and each week would go by, I'd have more and more on these sheets of paper on these days of the week. And to make it easier for myself, I picked literally from Saturday to Sunday to Sunday. And it made it a little bit easier to work off, knowing where I came from to knowing where I was going. And the first Sunday was the backstory. So it actually started on the Saturday, because that chapter was supposed to originally be the prologue of where it was going to go, but it ended up being chapter 1, which worked out better for me. So I had to think of a secret first of all. Now, everyone who knows me knows that I absolutely love murder. For some strange reason, I'm very comfortable writing about violence and violent deaths. So I chose gruesome murder, and I'm not going to give too many secrets away with this one because I want you to read it. I had to pick a specific thing. I decided to latch onto bones as my secret. The last time I read a story about bones, it was about a shaman, and or I think it was either a shaman or what the Wiccans would have called a warlock or something, and he would have gotten the bones to do these ritual type things with. And there is one scene in the book where she's starting out, and it explains how this all came to be, how she started into the bones with her jewellery, where the obsession and the thought came from, a lot about her backstory, which I incorporated while I was writing the story. It didn't happen quickly. I didn't actually have a good background for this character. I just sort of spewed it out from the little town that she was in and just sort of went from there, and it just snowballed, I guess. And I was really lucky with this one that it continued in a very progressive way. It really worked out for me, this one. I'd say I had one little struggle, and it was sort of fitting between... I had an ending, but it turned out not to be the ending that I wrote. It was in the story, but it didn't end there, and I continued, and that's where I struggled. So my ending became sort of my middle, and then I had to think of an ending, but I'm better at writing endings and beginnings than I am at writing middles. So it worked out well for me. It was more the backstory that got me with this one. Because like I said, with my other stories, I base off of my life like this one, and I base this one off of a couple of games, as you've heard me talk about before, and my other ones I've based off of things like fairy tales. So I've had sort of something to pull from, whereas this one is completely imaginative and just pulled from different things that I'd heard, but created in a way that came alive, I guess. I'm hoping I portrayed it well. And she's supposed to be psychopathic. It was one of my traits that I needed her to have, because I didn't want to write that millennial type story that will, you know, romanticize things and just be all this and this, da 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 da. I don't like it. It bores me. It really bores me, the linear lines. So I decided to go with something different, and I just let it roll. So she's a psychopath. She's tall, very leggy. She has a short boyfriend with an athlete's body, more like a swimmer's triangle body. It's not the usual blonde hair, blue eyes, skinny type thing. I needed to have more. I just didn't want to be the same, you know? So yes, keep reading. Buy it for Christmas. It is the season after all. It would make a great present. And it's not just pearls in here. There are 8 different stories, as I told you before. And they are all absolutely fabulous. It's available on Amazon now. And so is Blood in the Mirror. I'll put all the links in the description below. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for watching.